Welcome everyone, Dylan Gemelli here today with a brand new video for you, and today we are going to talk about the 5 most underrated steroids out there. But before we get into that, huge thank you to everybody supporting the channel. Please continue to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, click that bell icon after you subscribe so you don't miss any notifications from YouTube, and make sure that you are following on Apple, Spotify, and Google on my podcast. All of these videos are in podcast form and you don't want to miss those. So, let's talk about the Dylan Gemelli list of the 5 most underrated steroids. I think that many of you are going to agree with me on this. Some of you might have some others that you want to throw in there, and that's cool. Throw them in there. Let's kind of, like I say every time I do a list, it's my list. It's subjective. I like to get some good, conversation going. Not all these insulting things and this, and this. Let's get some good convo. You might agree, you might disagree. It's always cool to kind of compare and see if I'm missing something or if I bring something new to light or whatever the case, because nobody knows everything. So, top 5 most underrated according to me. Number 5 is NPP. Now, DECA is extremely popular. I think we can all agree on that. And NPP, nandrolone phenylpropionate, just in case you didn't know, is the short ester form of DECA. I personally, and I am involved in forums and emails and just everything. This is something that is just obviously, a major part of my life. And NPP is not really that widely used or nearly as common as one would expect. And I find it to be extremely underrated. We know what DECA is capable of, well, so is NPP. And NPP, to me, I would think would be more popular considering it's short ester. Its kick-in time is way faster because we know DECA is a very long ester. Many people will tell you that they find cleaner gains, less water retention, that kind of thing with NPP as opposed to DECA, yet you don't see as many people using it. I mean, there's a lot of plus side when it comes to NPP, and I'm not sure if it's because people don't know about it or what the case may be, but when you can run it and get away with running it shorter, and supposedly, I will argue that in a separate time when I just, do some kind of comparison between the two, that it's a cleaner gain. You would think that it would be more widely used, but it's not. And so I put it at number 5 on my list simply because you just don't find it as commonly used. Number 4, I think a lot of it is misunderstanding what the actual benefit of it is, but it's Proviron. Look, Proviron is not something that you take to get some sort of huge gain on its own. It's just not. Proviron is like the ultimate Robin to Batman, although with a little bit less, coming forth outright. So what Proviron does, and I've covered this, but just quickly, is it frees up bound testosterone, which will also lower your SHBG. Now, freeing up bound testosterone is going to allow you to get way more out of what you're doing, and lowering SHBG is going to get you a much better libido and just a much easier ability to make gains. So we're talking about basically an enhancer for your performance enhancer. And that's what I love about Proviron. Not to mention it has aromatase inhibitor properties. It is not a replacement, but however, it can help with you maybe using less of an aromatase inhibitor, for example, but it will also help in that area. And I find that people have a less than ideal understanding of it, or a higher expectation of it, or possibly just don't have good quality. But it's more or less understanding what it does and realizing how it's benefiting you. And it's kind of like a not so much on the surface thing, but you have to have a real nice understanding of what it actually does and what it can do for you and what it's doing while you use it. And I find Proviron to be extremely underrated for that reason. I do find a lot more people using it than, say, NPP, but it's still underrated. Number 3 is my favorite, and that is Primobolan. Now, there are people that are like me that absolutely love Primobolan, but there are a lot of people that say, oh, it didn't do anything for me, or oh, I don't notice it, or you have to understand what Primobolan does. And you also have to understand, and many of you do, that Primobolan is often faked. It is very expensive, and you have got to know your source and where you're getting from, and really know that you have true Primobolan. And if you have true Primobolan, it is one of the, actually to me, is the cleanest aside from maybe Proviron, which has, not a toxic oral steroid, but it doesn't do, to the amount of what a Primobolan would do. We're talking clean gains, continuous, dry, lean gains throughout, feeling great on it. And to me, it's just not as widely used because it's not so bang, bang on the surface. It's one of those things you got to be patient with and understand, and that's what I'm going to get into with the next one as well, compound. But you have to be patient and watch it work. You know, it's more suitable to a person like me that's not trying to bulk all the time and likes those long-term, more cleaner gains, but nothing hugely drastic. But I find Primobolan to be underrated for several reasons, which I just covered. Number 2, equipoise. Now, I find equipoise, and also what I'm going to go with number 1, to be like, they're not so much for bulking, they're not so much for cutting, they're like a recomposition dream, but they kind of fall in the middle. And something like equipoise requires a ton of patience, which most of us don't have, and I get it, because when we want something, we want it right now. And look, I get it, because I'm like that. When I want like a new pair of shoes, I want them tomorrow, I want them today, I want them right now. But you got to understand, this is long term, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and you have to understand that some of these take a lot longer to build, and equipoise is an extremely long ester, and it's not just this insanely drastic boom, boom, boom right off the jump. It's not. It takes time. It takes patience, and it takes understanding. So equipoise, while very effective and is kind of popular, is very underrated in terms of what it can do. Number 1 is T-ball, Turinabol. There's a lot of reasons why T-ball is underrated. It is definitely not as widely used as an Anavar, a D-ball, a Winstrol in terms of oral steroids. It's one of those, again, that falls right in the middle. You don't look at it when you think of a cutting compound. It's not the first thing that comes to mind. It'll make your list. And if you're looking at bulking, it's definitely not the first one, but you know you can gain size on it. It's a middleman, right in the middle, which, you know, recomposition's what everybody wants, so you would think T-ball would be a little bit more popular. It often gets viewed as baby brother to, or little sister to D-ball, which I find to be ridiculous, because, you know, it's just because it doesn't have the estrogen conversion and water retention. You get a ton of strength, you can get nice lean size, the side effects aren't as harsh as other oral steroids that you can run into. I find T-ball to be, you know, highly, highly, highly regarded by many people that do use it, and very beneficial, being that it can do so many different things. It's just not as popular or common, and it's very underrated and does not get that widespread love that it really truly does deserve. So that's why I have T-ball number 1 on my list as most underrated. So let's compare lists, let's chop it up, let's talk about it, get some good convo going, and stay tuned for plenty more to come. Dylan Gemelli signing off.